Thank you for coming out, all of you. We're honored to stand before you, my wife and I. I think most of you know I'm Big Mac, married to the brain, 31 years, subject to most of the books and DVDs that we have. We have a 4-book special for you, covering all 4 sessions. Who's been here for all the sessions so far? Well done. Okay. So we'll say in South Africa, like you're educated. Talking about education, I want to correct the perception that we always have that blondes are stupid. You know, the joke's always about a blonde and so on. So this blonde walks into a bank in New York City and she says she wants a loan of $5,000. So the guy asks her, what's your collateral? So she drops the keys of a Mercedes 350 and said, that's it. And that's a lot of collateral for $5,000. So he says, I'll take it. So she leaves. And what was the loan for? She said she's going overseas for 2 weeks. So when she's gone, he goes around to his friends and said, some silly girl just dropped the keys of a Mercedes worth $100,000 and she wanted a $5,000 loan. Anyway, he went and parked it downstairs. She came back 2 weeks later. He said, you know, I've been looking up you and you're quite rich. You're a millionaire. Why did you want to borrow this money? And your interest bill is only $14. She says, where else can you park in New York City for $14 and still get your car back again?
He loves that joke. He's always telling jokes in the house, and the kids call them dad jokes. You know what the dad jokes, and then when I tell them it's the mom jokes, and they're never quite as funny. So anyway, good morning, everyone. I'm so excited to be back and to help you switch your brain on even more and increase your intelligence even more. Are you learning something about how great your mind is? Such a privilege to understand how to use this incredible mind, and such a responsibility to understand how to use our mind. So this morning what I want to do is dive into the science of choice, linking it into mental health as I've been doing, thank you so much, and just take you a little bit deeper in each session and be just growing a little deeper in understanding how to manage your mind. You know, one of the things that has really struck me in the 30 years of working in this field, and especially my time in South Africa when I worked in that really traumatically challenged environments, and then also with all my patients that had traumatic brain injuries and incredibly severe trauma, as well as working with people with learning disabilities and all that kind of stuff, and the trauma that goes along with that, and autism and dementia. There's so much emotional stuff that goes along with all these things. But what struck me the most was 2 things. Number one, when you love someone, when you really make them feel, and when I say love, I'm talking about love in a relationship with people, communicating with them, connecting with them in a deep, meaningful way. You transform how they see themselves. It's so important that we really learn to ooze love from every pore of our being. Einstein's work, as I've mentioned a couple of times, will really reflect if you're operating authentically in love or whether you're just kind of putting it on the outside. So is it coming from deep down from inside of you, and are you pouring that love on others, even if you don't agree with what they say, even if you don't really agree with their belief system, or even if you think they're crazy, or if you can't see that what they see is a problem, whatever it is, to put yourself sort of down there behind and to put that person out front is a very powerful tool for empowering people to be able to activate the natural resilience that is inside of them. In fact, the line of research that I have been doing and that I'm going down is what we call evidence-based research. And evidence-based medicine means that the things that you do have to have proof basically behind them. Hopefully they work. Hopefully there's a significant improvement when you use a certain type of medication or a certain type of intervention. And that's called evidence-based. A very good way of practicing working with humanity. One of the things that I feel is the most important things when it comes to humanity and all this concept is that love is actually the most evidence-based form of intervention you can actually have. So what do I mean by that? There's evidence when you operate in love. We see that modeled in Jesus. We see that modeled in your relationships when you are in a good relationship and when you reach out and love someone. The evidence is there. They change. You change. You feel different. Your body physiologically changes. Your brain neurophysiologically changes. We have so much evidence that when we develop these loving, deep, meaningful connections, that we will operate at a completely different level. So when we apply the principles of love, operating in love, being made in the image of love, living in that loving humanitarian way that Jesus showed us, we are supplying the best evidence for mental health intervention. So that's why we've got to be very careful that we use love as our guideline for dealing with the spiritual nature of man. Okay, so when we talk about the 99% spiritual, if you can just show the first slide, the 99% spiritual, which on my theory is that green and the pink part, okay, then we need to make sure that our intervention is always love-based, because that is the most where we get the most evidence-based intervention. So taking the 1% physical, it's very good in medicine to use physical-based intervention in terms of if you give this kind of medication for the heart, then this kind of improvement will happen. If you give insulin for diabetes, this kind of improvement will happen. So we use those physical, mechanical measures for the physical, but we can't take those chemicals and physical means and put them onto the love side or onto the spiritual side. And that is a core underlying principle that I've seen in my work over the last 30 years. The other core principle, in addition to love being the strongest form of evidence-based, instead of trying to take a chemical and fix your mind, or a physical and fix your mind, you put love and you'll find that people are empowered to take the responsibility for their mind. The second thing is choice. We know how important choice is. We know we have free will. We know that free will is not an illusion. So therefore, we need to understand the science of choice. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that today as well. Okay, so just to remind you of your different parts of your mind, because we're going to be looking at this in a little bit more depth over the next 2 sessions. The green part is your non-conscious. It's the bigger part of the 99%, and it operates 24/7. Operates on quantum principles, so it's incredibly fast. Okay, so you constantly, at 400 billion actions per second, your mind is constantly working. Your mind is always working. And that mind that's always working is very creative. It's very dynamic. It's very organic, and it's constantly evolving and changing. So you're not a fixed, pre-programmed individual. The more you tap into your brilliance, the more your brilliance will grow. The more that you learn new information, the more you develop your brain, the more intelligent you become. So one of the things that I address intensively in this book, which is my latest book and part of what I call the toolbox, this book, Think, Learn, Succeed, is to address the concept of taking advantage of the fact that your non-conscious mind is so brilliant, and that with your conscious mind, you become very deliberate and intentional about using your non-conscious mind as much as possible. So you want to bring the connection between the conscious and the non-conscious mind. And how do you do that? You do this in 2 ways. Firstly, you do it by building your brain, by using your mind to build your brain. We see from neuroscience that your brain is an organ that is designed to grow. It's an organ that is designed to get more and more information. It's an organ that's constantly hungry for knowledge. So that makes a lot of sense. I mean, knowledge comes from God, and you're brilliant, and God wants us to understand the world around us and ourselves. So we should be constantly learning new information. This is a very big part of mental health. But it's a very big part of mental health that is not addressed. Because people think as soon as you talk about the word mental health, then immediately you are talking about things like people that are sick. Well, we're not talking about that. Mental health is basically managing your mind, renewing your mind, bringing all thoughts into captivity every 10 seconds. All thoughts, all 18,000 to 180,000, however many thoughts we think in a day, bringing all of them into captivity, aligning them with your perfect you nature, and correcting and changing and rewiring what is toxic in your life. If you've wired it in, you can wire it out. You're not a victim of your biology. You are a victor over and above your biology, okay, which is amazing. So that's all that renewing of the mind stuff, and that's what we are designed to do every 10 seconds. So as we are renewing our mind, we also need to be, part of renewing the mind is building the mind. And we see that the more you learn, the more you develop your mind, the more intelligent you become. So this is wonderful news because this means that intelligence is not static and fixed like we've been told with the IQ movement, which is very unscientific, by the way. So IQ is a number and you're not a number. I mentioned this yesterday morning as well. So we need to also realize that the more you learn, the more intelligent you become. And the more open-minded you become to learn the knowledge that God has given us access to, the more intelligent you become. We live in a day and age where it's really easy to get our hands on information. So it's like there's information at our fingertips. But we have to be careful that we don't just gather data like pieces of a puzzle, but we never build the puzzle. So when I talk about building the brain using the mind for mental health, I'm talking about gathering data and building the data into something that is meaningful. I'm talking about gathering the pieces of the puzzle and building the puzzle. Why am I saying that? Well, we live in a very fast technological age where everything's a quick fix kind of thing, where everything is so easy to access information, to stay connected that you're disconnected, to gather data but not to build the puzzle. So therefore, we need to make sure that we are not just scrolling through and reading headlines and just gathering little bits of information Twitter style. That we're not just living on 140 character, 1 second grabbing of information, because that is very unhealthy for the brain. That needs to be very limited. Technology is absolutely amazing, but one of the downsides of technology is this gathering of the puzzle pieces but not building of the data. Your brain is designed to think deeply. You're a highly intelligent, deep-thinking individual. So that means that you need to take that information and think about it deeply. It is important that you set aside at least an hour a day, at least, preferably more, where you select an article that has caught your attention, or you take a book that you're studying, and I say really studying, or something that you're interested in, and you put aside an hour, wherever it is during the day, and you read that information to understand that information, to build good memory about that information. Don't just scan through. It doesn't stimulate your brain sufficiently. You need to ask, answer, discuss to understand. I researched over the years a lot about how memory builds, how thoughts form. Thoughts and memories are the same thing. And it's basically a 5-step process, a very complex process, but I simplified into 5 steps. And those 5 steps you use to grow your brain. And I put them down very clearly in the book Think, Learn, Succeed. But one of the key elements of those 5 steps is gathering awareness of that information. In other words, reading it with all your focus in a very deliberate and intentional way. With technology, with the busyness of life, we get very distracted. And when we get very distracted, we kind of just let information chaotically roam through our head. And that is not a good idea. Okay, so what we want to do is become very deliberate. You'll hear me say this over and over again. Deliberate and intentional about how you use that purple part of your brain, your conscious mind, to make sure that you are activating and using the power of the non-conscious part of the brain. In other words, your spirit needs to be one of constantly activated. This is why we need to renew our mind and bring all thoughts into captivity. It is a very deliberate and intentional action. And the one part you apply to is the building of your brain. I spend at least 2 hours, often more, researching information in my field, reading it and understanding it. I don't just read a headline or an abstract of a research article. I read the entire article. I study it. I apply the 5 steps. I learn the information, and I constantly build my brain like that. When you woke up this morning, you woke up with thousands of new baby nerve cells. This is called neurogenesis, absolute gift from God. And these new baby nerve cells are designed to help you get through the day as you learn new information. Because during the course of the day, in addition to this at least 1 hour of brain building exercise I've just suggested for your mental health, is you are learning new information all the time. So you're always learning. You are always thinking, feeling, and choosing, which then leads to building the memory or the thought, which equals learning. So you think, feel, and choose. You're always thinking, feeling, and choosing. The 3 go together. As you think, feel, and choose, you build a memory, which is a thought, and that equals learning. You are always learning. You're a thinking, learning being. And what we found is that when you use those new baby nerve cells When you think, learn, and feel, when you think, feel, and choose and learn in the way that you're designed to do, you will build a healthy brain. You will build a brain that is functioning at a higher level. That brain then, which is through which you express your spirit nature, is then going to be so much healthier, and you're going to be able to verbalize things more effectively. You're going to be much more effective in how you explain things and how you understand things and how you get access to the answers that are in the zone, the wisdom zone, that you'll get access to that information. As you keep your mind in order, so this happens. But if your mind becomes a chaotic mess, it's a problem. Let me show you the next slide, which is a graphic, and I'll elaborate this a little bit more. So the graphic, I've done, as I've mentioned, quite a lot of research over the years, and this is just one graph of many different studies I've done and many different graphics, but it's a very easy one to understand. And what it is I looked at various different institutions, educational institutions, learning institutions, corporate environments, etc., and focused on is there a natural trend in an organization to increase knowledge or knowledge management. And generally what happens is it kind of goes up and it goes down and it goes up and it goes down. So it's kind of this very low, this very simple wave, but which evens off statistically to a straight line. So I found that very interesting, that the trend is that people are not really changing that much. They're not really learning as much as they could. It's more like things are kind of staying on a status quo. And then every now and then there'll be a jump. Generally, the jump comes from something that is intentional and deliberate. So what I've found is that when you teach people to be very intentional and deliberate about how they are thinking, feeling, and choosing, how they are building their brain, how they are using those new baby nerve cells, how they are detoxing their brain, then you will find a dramatic improvement in people's cognitive, intellectual, emotional, and social functioning. So that's why you see the third bar graph there suddenly jumping. I found from my research, which has been confirmed over the years by my other research, as well as many other people that work in this field from top universities around the world and institutions, is that when you deliberately and intentionally control the way that you are consciously controlling your mind, in other words, when you self-regulate, when you bring all thoughts into captivity, when you deliberate to learn and use your brain, you will improve your functioning on a cognitive, emotional, social, academic, intellectual, and all levels by 35 to 75%. Now, who in this room wouldn't like to improve? Exactly, okay? So, therefore, this is something that's natural to us. And you know what? If you don't deliberately, intentionally, consciously regulate the way you are using your mind, the way you are thinking and feeling, the choices that you make, etc., you actually create toxic waste in your brain. Physical toxic trash in your brain, which impacts the functionality and the health of the brain, which then impacts the functionality and health of the body. So all 75 to 100 trillion cells of your brain and your body will be damaged by not learning and not building your brain and not using those nerve cells that you woke up with in the morning. They turn into toxic waste. They turn into garbage. They turn into things that impact the electrical, chemical, and quantum flow through your brain and through your entire body. And that makes you feel edgy, anxious, maybe even a bit depressed, like that, I don't know what's wrong with me, but something's wrong. It can also lead to a feeling of physical exhaustion, that you can't kind of rest and go to sleep, but you actually feel exhausted. I mean, you feel like my brain's just working overtime. People often say to me, can you please write a book on how to switch off the brain? Which might be a good thing to do, but essentially what it is that we are exhausting our brains. We're exhausting our bodies. Why? Because our mind is the 99%. Remember, the mind falls in the spiritual, falls in the thinking, feeling, choosing, and it is quantum in nature, eternal in nature, massively fast and incredibly infinitely huge and connected to the source of power. It is your source of energy. You plugged in, okay? But your brain is very limited and your body is very limited. They need to rest. So they kind of can't handle a constant stream of energy from the brain. So if you constantly on the go, in a chaotic way. Mac, could you bring up that list of things, the list of things that can cause these problems? We're going to see another list now. If you're constantly not managing the busyness of life, if you're constantly on the go, hurry sickness, under the directorate of time, I've got to do, swinging from one thing to the next, thinking that you can multitask, but multitasking is a myth. No one can multitask, and those people that think they can, it actually decreases their intelligence. The correct term for people that do busy well is doing busy well. Multitasking creates like milkshake in your brain. Literally, it damages the brain. So that is this, it's like when you jump from here to there, to there, to there, and nothing is done properly. And that makes you feel like this. And it just feels too much. And that causes tremendous physical stress on the actual physical brain and the physical body. And your brain, physical brain and body have to have frequent rest during the course of the day. Very important. And then regenerate at night. So we multitask correctly on a non-conscious level, but it's not even really multitasking. It's actually basically called parallel processing. But people that are doing a lot well or doing busy well, like I like to explain, are basically have managed to deliberately and consciously regulate how they manage their day. And no one's always good at this all the time, but we are designed to do busy well. We are designed to be able to focus, okay, I'm busy with this, and the phone goes, and I've got to deal with this, and I've got a million things to do. We are designed to, even if you don't finish one particular activity because something urgent has now come that you have to address in that particular moment, there's a level of, okay, I won't finish this now, but I'll finish it later, and you jump to the next thing. Not this, I don't know where to go next. That's not multitasking, and if you think you are multitasking, as I said, the research shows those people that think they're good multitaskers actually have their IQ drops. And IQ is not fixed, it changes. So as soon as you stop that pattern and you start doing busy well, it changes. And I talk a lot about doing busy well in my book, Switch on Your Brain, and I explain that as well. But essentially, if you are learning, taking the time each day, at least an hour a day, to deliberately, intentionally, and consciously learn new information, sit down quietly and study something new, it is going to be very, very good for helping you do busy well and not fall in the trap of multitasking. It's going to help you to not just gather the data, but it's going to train you to pay attention to relevant data. Here's some more good news when we talk about paying attention to relevant data. You're not designed to remember everything. I address memory extensively in my latest book, Think, Learn, Succeed. It's a huge part of the work that I've done, and it's been an area that's very misunderstood. No one is designed to remember everything. You're designed to remember where your passion lies. In other words, things that you are interested in. So obviously we need to have a general knowledge of what is going on in the world and general learning, but we know more about our areas of interest and expertise where our passion drives us. And also, you're not going to know about it all immediately, and you're not going to remember everything immediately. And it's okay to forget names. You're not getting dementia. It's only if there's a significant change in your patterns. So this whole thing, I've got to remember everything, is also putting people under tremendous pressure and causing problems. It's like telling people, if you don't sleep, your brain's going to get damaged. If you're forgetting, you're getting dementia. You've got an illness of depression. Can you see that is fear-mongering? You just hear those and you get a knot in your stomach. And then the research shows that when you start fearing those things, you have a 63% chance of getting those things. If you're worrying about not sleeping because the damage it does to your heart and your brain, which is true, but if you worry about that, then you won't sleep. And when you do sleep, it will be disturbed. And if you haven't built your brain during the day and you haven't used those thousands of new nerve cells, and you go to sleep at night, you're going to sleep with a bunch of toxic waste. It's going to disturb your sleep. If you haven't taken the time to build information into your brain, you're not going to go to sleep in an organized way. So it's going to affect the regenerative nature of your sleep. If you don't focus on doing busy well and developing this in a conscious, deliberate way, it's going to affect your sleep. If you don't bring all thoughts into captivity and train yourself deliberately and consciously to do that every 10 seconds, like I mentioned last night, which is a constant communication with the Spirit of God, if you think of it, like staying in a constant state of prayer. If you don't do that, it will affect your sleep at night. But now you mustn't go into guilt and condemnation about, I haven't done any of that, I'm not going to sleep well, because that'll keep you also not let you sleep. So don't get into guilt and condemnation. Guilt and condemnation are things that lock you into the toxic zone. If you've messed up all day, if you haven't been conscious and deliberate, if you've done all the things wrong, at night before you go to bed, say, okay, I did it. Celebrate and embrace the mess you made in order to acknowledge the mess you made, in order to fix the mess you made. But if you deny it and go to bed, I didn't do any of that, no, then that's going to make it worse. Can you see what I'm trying to say to you? If the human condition is to desire to do well, it's naturally inside of us, to desire to build memory and learn and deal with life and connect with humans and do all these love things and make good choices, but we just make messes. But we can change that. We can slowly, over time, give ourselves grace to learn how to change it. But you have to start by making a decision. Okay, I want to learn how to think, feel, and choose in my perfect you nature. I want to learn how to use those new baby nerve cells, and I want to be deliberate and intentional about building my brain for an hour every day. I'm not going to say I'm too busy, because as soon as you say that to me, I'll say stop watching TV and get off Facebook and social media and Instagram and scrolling through, looking at everyone else's lives that are totally curated, as we all know. I'm sure if you cut back on your Instagram and social media, and adults, by the way, and up to the ages of 78 are as bad as the youth. So don't say the youth are bad, adults are worse. That's what the research shows. Okay, so put your own phones down before you criticize someone else. And what are you looking at on your phone? You could take that time on your phone to find an article and to read. If you see me on my phone, I am either talking to my kids or I am reading research. I've trained myself. I'll only look at social media, and I only have a business account only 3 times a day. That's all I do. Unless there's some emergency that we have to address, I don't look at it. I just keep an eye on what's going on to make sure that whatever's going on there. So it's not controlling me. But I've had to make that decision. I've had to choose to do that. I've had to choose to decide, where am I going to put my energy? Am I going to spend my energy on junk that's going to upset me? Or am I going to spend my energy on building my brain? And when I do go on social media and you see something that makes you feel that, I'm immediately going to grab that thought, celebrate that thought, and say, why do I feel like this? And evaluate. So I don't ever let anything just get swept under the carpet. I'm going to be very deliberate about why I'm getting a certain reaction. And when you live this kind of lifestyle and you find the reasons for why you respond in the way that you do, you are moving slowly towards living in this zone. Okay, you are getting into the point where you are operating in love and making good choices. And that is something that you are actually very good at. It just takes a bit of time to get yourself into that mode of thinking. It's a shifting of your mindsets. I'm going to talk tomorrow night when I do at the graduation ceremony, I'm going to talk a lot about mindsets and explain to you how you can renew your mind to the correct mindsets. For now, what I want you to really get a handle on is that in order to build your brain, in order to really get your mind under control, you need to build your brain. So I want you to have a look at the list that's up on the screen now. And I want you to see that there's a whole bunch of lists of things there. And yesterday, I told you about the fact that people are dying 15 to 25 years younger than they did just a few short decades ago. For decades, people have been living longer. The scariest thing about that is it's a global phenomenon, and the scarier thing about that is it's from preventable lifestyle diseases. Preventable. So people are dying from things that are actually things that shouldn't be happening. And they track the main preventable thing, the main number one reason that this trend has reversed is, guess what? Mind management. So when we live under this now, look at this list over here. These things are causing chaotic, toxic thoughts, technology mismanaged, mental ill health misunderstood, labels locking people in, identity crisis and meaninglessness. Those are the broad categories of what are causing people to pretty much die younger. The other element related to that is also causing early death is what we are putting physically in our body in terms of chemicals. And chemicals like toxic food, the modern American diet, which is aptly called the MAD diet, which is based on food like industrialized products and not real food, and is pretty much chemically based. And these chemicals are addictive. They are more addictive than cocaine and heroin. And therefore you will go through the same withdrawal symptoms. They damage your hormone system. It's an unregulated industry, so it's the food industry, so the industrialized food industry, and it is basically designed, and there's no regulation, but it's designed to damage your hormone system, so you don't know when you're hungry. You don't know when you're not hungry. You're just always hungry, and you don't recognize when you're full. It's designed to damage your brain so that you get toxic addictive patterns wired into your brain. So your brain pretty much gets damaged in the thinking pathway. It's designed to do that, and they are allowed to they have laboratories around the world. In the United States, one of the biggest laboratories doing this food research is called the Monell Laboratory. And they bring children in as young as 4, and they test them on, they use these children to test these chemical concoctions made from GMO corn, soy, and wheat, and they have chemical additives. And they look for what they call the bliss point. And the bliss point is the point at which the children say, give me more, 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 more. And the bliss point is the point at which the hormone system is now damaged and the brain is now damaged. And that's what they think is successful. So they realize if they can damage your brain, guess what? You're going to eat more. And therefore, they're going to make more money. And now you're going to get sicker and you need more medicine. And not only do these foods damage your brain and body, but they damage your gut. And there's an intimate connection between your gut and your brain. The gut-brain connection, and basically your gut is made of the same tissue, has the same tissue in it as your brain, has as many neurons as your spine. So, and 95% of serotonin is produced in your gut and 50% of dopamine, 2 chemicals very important for learning, focus, memory, mood, etc. And so therefore, when you eat this junk food, it affects your gut bacteria, it affects those neurotransmitters, it affects the proteins, it affects pretty much everything, blood flow, everything. So we have a lot of gastrointestinal issues. And then not only that, it affects your blood chemistry. And things go into your brain that shouldn't go into your brain. They cross the blood-brain barrier and they cause damage in the brain. And that causes concentration and focus and attention. And we start seeing that every second person now has ADHD. It would be great if ADHD was really a scientifically evidence-based category, but it's not. Learning disabilities do exist, but they are not ADHD and ADD. Those are categories that were made up a few years ago. And now every second person has ADD. Meanwhile, let's address our diet and the chemicals and our mind management. And then we start seeing, hey, I can concentrate. My child can't go to school on a diet of MAD. And start school early in the morning and be given the test, teaching to the test math kind of exams and so on like that and work when their cortisol levels are only ready to learn at around 10 in the morning. But these kids at 8 o'clock in the morning on terrible diets, under extreme stress and terrible teaching conditions, which is happening in this country, it's happening around the world. It's really gone downhill, education, as you're all aware, in this country. And these kids are expected to learn. I get called in I've been working education for years. I've been called in for years to do projects in South Africa and even in this country. And just recently, I got called in again to work with another district in Texas. And I'm thinking, okay, well, it's the same thing. I'm going to go in and train the teachers how to learn, how to build memory, how to grow your brain, how to manage technology, all these things and I talk about a lot of the education stuff in my book, Think, Learn, Succeed. But you know what they asked me? They said, no, Dr. Leaf, we need you to come in and address teacher burnout. We need you to address how to control the de-escalation that's occurring in the classrooms. We need you to first address the mental health of our teachers and the mental health of our children. When you've done that, and you've given us some tools and techniques, then we can talk about learning. So now I'm thinking, what has happened at school? That these kids are feeling like this. That the highest rate of suicide, the 4th leading cause of death amongst 8-year-olds in the United States is suicide. When an 8-year-old is committing suicide at school because they're fearful, they're being bullied, they're not managing, and then these kids are given drugs, they're given labels, they're given drugs. Our generation of children and grandchildren, I don't have grandchildren yet, I have granddogs, but when I do have grandchildren, and I have one grandkitty, this next generation of children are growing up thinking that mind is an illness. They have pathologized childhood. They have pathologized a child's desire to run around and move and be excited and called it ADHD and given them a stimulant that is equivalent to speed, that is damaging their brain, that is going to create addictive patterns. And on top of it, the modern American diet. And on top of it, these kids are then moving into adulthood without being allowed to process their stuff. Are we surprised our kids are battling? We have to actually take responsibility. We, the adults, we, the big people in the room. We need to look at what our children are being exposed to. We have a massive responsibility to be able to manage how we are looking at what our children are looking at. And I'm not just talking about TV, I'm talking about how they're viewing the world. And this is something, are we spending time making sure our children eat healthy? Are we spending time letting them get out in fresh air and play? Are we allowing our children to process the information? Are you allowing them to talk to you even if you don't like what you're hearing? If they don't talk to you and get advice from you, where are they going to get it from? Are you sitting with your children and helping them learn? Are you understanding that for teenagers it's the most difficult life cycle of the entire human life cycle? Are you helping them with their diet? Are you helping them with their learning? Are you realizing when they are getting difficult, or with teenagers, they can get very difficult, that they're not maybe giving you a message? Instead of telling them that they're being undisciplined and rebellious, maybe you need to listen to them. A survey was done in the United States of America, massive meta-analysis asking teenagers between the age of 13 and 18, what is the main thing you want from your parents? Do you know what they said? To be listened to. Are you listening in love? Are you deliberately and intentionally bringing your thoughts into captivity so that you can model that for your children? Are you helping your children to learn to listen while you listen to them and bring thoughts into captivity? Are you modeling, building your brain to manage your mental health for your children and encouraging them how to do that? Children will do what you do, not do what you say. There's a lot of things we need to look at, but if you look at what chaotic thoughts do in the brain, they cause neurochemical chaos. When our mind is so filled with thoughts that it's just this massive, chaotic bamboozling of ideas and information and not knowing, and the younger you are, the less skills you have to manage this, those chaotic thoughts cause a chaotic wave of quantum energy through the brain, which causes chaotic electromagnetic energy, which causes chaotic chemical responses, which causes chaotic genetic responses, which causes mutations in genes, which causes these toxic things. And as I mentioned last night, your immune system, your neuroimmune system, the immune system of your brain, which works with the immune system of your body, responds to those toxic thoughts in the same way as your body would respond to a virus. We know when our body has a virus, our immune system sends out soldiers to fight the virus. And that's what is, and the immune system of the brain and the body sees that toxic thought as real as a virus. Did you know that? There's no difference in the design of the brain and the body in terms of recognizing a virus versus a toxic thought. It's the same thing. Toxic thoughts are real things. And toxic thoughts are chaotic toxic thoughts. When we have a chaotic mind, an undisciplined mind, we will build toxic thoughts because we won't be bringing all thoughts into captivity. Can you see the link? If we're not being self-regulated, if we're not being deliberate and intentional, then we're not moving in the direction of that graph that I showed you earlier on, where we're training ourselves to increase our functionality by 35 to 75%. The mere fact that we have research in science shows us that God is saying it's a process. It's a process we develop over time. We have to be deliberate and intentional. If you don't get your mind right, nothing else is going to be right. Nothing. You won't be able to absorb what the scriptures are teaching because your mind is so filled with chaos that it's a complete block. It's like having a storm and all the trees are in the road and your car can't get through. And you know that that's good stuff on the other side, but you're kind of hearing it and you're seeing it, but you can't get it in because your mind is filled with toxicity. And that toxicity causes the neurochemical chaos and the brain damage. And thank goodness it can be rewired. You can change it, but it's still causing the chaos. And that leads to those feelings of depression and anxiety and even psychotic breaks. And if we haven't dealt with traumas, it increases. So we've got to deal with those chaotic thoughts. Let's look at the next thing. Technology, I briefly mentioned already. Technology is a great thing. Technology is a great thing, but it has to be managed. And it's not something that we can just allow ourselves to spend hours and hours on, because just the mere fact that your brain merges with whatever you are focusing on. So when you're looking at something, your screen constantly, your brain is merging with that. You need to decide where you want to spend your energy. So use the technology, use the computers, but very limited. The average person is spending up to 8 hours a day on social media type stuff. That's too much. 2 hours is the max you should be spending on social media. If your job is one of working a lot with computers, then you need to make sure that you're taking regular breaks every hour, even if it's to close your eyes and just let your mind rest for 30 seconds to a minute. These are very real things. There's a lot of tips on technology there, but we're seeing technologies changing the way that the internal networks of the brain connect, because there's constant bombardment of information in these little bite-sized chunks that you're not taking and processing is causing the networks to feel overloaded. And that is why I said to you in the beginning, you need to take the time to choose what you're going to focus on and spend an hour building your brain. It is an incredible antidote to the damage of technology and an incredible antidote to feeling mental ill health. Remember, mental ill health is something we all experience. It's the human condition. We mustn't medicalize misery. We mustn't pathologize the normal conditions of life and the reactions that we have to and our expressions to the context of our life. And everyone's going to be different in how we respond to the context of life. So we need to have tools to increase our resilience. We need to have understanding to increase our resilience. And that's why these tools that I'm giving you are doing all these amazing things. By learning to take an hour a day to study something that you're interested in, you learn how to self-regulate every 10 seconds. By learning how to understand how you think, feel, and choose, the perfect you I spoke yesterday, and to understand your discomfort zones, you learn how to self-regulate every 10 seconds. By taking 7 to 15 minutes a day, and notice I'm standing here, detoxing your brain. You can take an hour to 2 hours to 3 hours building your brain, but taking 7 to 16 minutes a day, detoxing your brain, is going to also bring healing back into your brain and your body. It's going to help you self-regulate every 10 seconds. But these are choices that you have to make. We've got to be so careful that we don't get stuck in the mental ill health labels. The mental ill health world is based on that 1% physical, what we call the biomedical model. It's ineffective. It is not working. It hasn't, the evidence is very strong to show that this model of medicating and labeling is not helping people. This medical model that I mentioned yesterday morning and last night, seeing you as just a brain and a broken brain with a neuropsychiatric or neurobiological break in your brain that's causing you to act like this, and not considering your stories the wrong way of looking at things. You can't just look at a symptom and then just diagnose that symptom, label that symptom, and then just try and reduce the symptom by giving you a chemical, by giving you some physical treatment. That's not going to work for your mind. The evidence is out. It's worse now. If it was working, we would have an improvement in mental health. But it isn't. It's worse. And as I said last night, you can't just stop drugs. You have to give the information on how to withdraw. And there's incredible research coming out, and I have it available on my site and great books and things on my site to advise people. But tapering of psychotropic drugs is where it's going now. And tapering strips are fantastic, because what they do is the portions that you go off are that you reduce the drugs by is so minute that you don't feel it, and then suddenly one day you're not taking them anymore. So it controls the reactions inside your body, because whatever you put into your body, whether it's the modern American diet, whether it's a psychotropic drug, whether it is an aspirin, whether it is a thought about your friend, whether it is what I'm saying to you now, you're putting stuff in your head, whether it is something, you see, everything that's going into your head, your brain grows. Your brain responds. You're growing your brain. You're changing the structure of your brain. So psychotropic meds change the structure of the brain in a bad way. And if you keep taking them, the evidence is showing that they shorten lifespans by 15 to 25 years. And that is why it's very good to get the information, not to have fear. Guilt, condemnation, and fear will keep you stuck. There's more books on guilt, condemnation, and shame in the Christian environment than any other environment. Why are Christians so guilty and filled with shame? Because they think that, I know about God, and why am I still like this? So there's a lot of guilt and shame, and it keeps them stuck. No, embrace and celebrate every mess you make in your life. Embrace the fact that you are aware now that these psychotropic drugs change your brain, because now you can change it. Anything that you're aware of is changeable. Anything you're not aware of is not changeable. And then you're stuck. And then you're stuck with chains around you. So we're breaking these chains. So labels become these chains. Labels become these chains that keep us stuck. Because when you are labeled with something scary like schizophrenia, which is not even a valid category. If it was valid, okay, but it's not. It's not scientific, and it's scary. And you get told that you've got this illness for the rest of your life, and you've got to take medications that make you feel terrible and have terrible side effects for the rest of your life, that's very frightening for the person and the family members. When research has shown that when you immerse people with psychotic breaks in love so that they can work through the process of detoxing and finding the underlying cause of why they've had the psychotic break, why they're hallucinating, why they are hearing voices, and maybe that's how they're experiencing the world. It's because they're trying to cope. They're trying to get balance back again. So instead of dragging them that they can't process and disconnecting the spirit from the physical, because that's what those drugs do, you listen to them. War vets. It doesn't help telling them that you have an illness of PTSD. They've just gone through terrible trauma. We're not designed to see what you see in war. So it doesn't help to drag them. It helps to listen to them so they can process and then go through the process of detoxing. When you listen to someone, you increase their resilience so they can face the toxic issue and do their 15 minutes a day to detox the brain, okay, and to get rid of that toxic information. So this power that's inside of you is going to enable you to be able to deal with fighting these labels. No one's allowed to label you except God. And what does God label you? As a brilliant, phenomenal human being. Don't let anyone tell you you are you're not. Okay? Labels lead to a tremendous identity crisis. Who am I? Am I schizophrenia? Am I cancer? Am I aggression? No, those are all toxic. Those are not who you are. They may be who you've come because of what you've gone through. But if we go away from just trying to label you and reduce your symptoms with a drug, which numbs your brain, that's not going to find the solution. We have to go into the Garden of Gethsemane, cry, freak out in the love zone, have the deep, meaningful connections. That's the evidence-based, love evidence-based, that's the evidence-based that will really work. Love is the true evidence base. And it's facing the pain and going through, like I demonstrated and spoke about last night. Labels will lock you in. Identity crisis will come. Unless you understand what it means to be wired for love, you're going to be knocked by every social media post, by every diagnosis, by everything, because you don't know who you are. And it's not enough just to say, I'm a child of God. What does that mean? That means that you have a love, power, and a sound mind, that you can bring all thoughts to captivity, that you do not have to fear, that you can cry and scream and shout like David did. The Bible is filled with stories about people freaking out, making bad decisions, and making a total mess of their life, and acknowledging it. Why do you think we have descriptions of people making a mess? And all the terrible things that you read about in the Bible, all the scary things, the stories of people's lives and all the great things, because we are seeing a model of humanity. That it's okay, you can't suppress, you have to process, but you also can't stay there. It doesn't mean that you can talk about this year after year after year. It is talk about it, process it. Now, what are you going to do about it? That's key to moving forward. I'm not giving you an open door to becoming a big whiner. I am not giving you an open door to constantly going on. I'm giving you an open door to start processing so that you can get through the cross, on the cross, and rise again. Which means, what are you going to do about this? Okay, I'm in a really bad place now. I'm going to spend 15 minutes a day. I'm going to make sure I've got an accountability partner. I'm going to spend an hour a day building my brain. I'm going to really practice listening to the discomfort zones. I'm going to get to grips with my identity. So spend that hour a day studying my material so that you can understand how to get your mind right. Add that to your Bible study. Use the techniques that I teach you how to build memory. Use that to study your Bible. Use those steps will build memory into your brain because they are effective memory building techniques. That's in Think, Learn, Succeed. When I keep talking about 5 steps, there are 5 steps that you use to build thoughts into your brain and to take thoughts, to rewire thoughts, into reconceptualize thoughts. And those are the same 5 steps you use to build your brain and the same 5 steps that you use to wire out the toxic thoughts. And they basically are becoming aware, number 1. Number 2 is deep thinking, deep focused thinking. Number 3 is write. You need to write. When you write, you activate the basal ganglia in the brain, which are structures deep down inside your brain, which helps to facilitate the process of sorting out the chaos in your mind and to bring meaningfulness back into your life, okay? And then the 4th thing is to edit what you've done. And the 5th thing is to get something action in the day. What are you going to do? And you do this literally, these 5 steps in the detoxing, you do a minute per step. And this is what my Switch app enables you to do. And I also have this process in the Switch on Your Brain book, which is the blue book. Okay? And the green book is the food book, where I teach you about the dangers of the modern American diet and how to make sure, and the impact on your mind. And I show you in that book how to understand that thinking is a cognitive event. Your mind controls your digestion. If you are toxic and angry and frustrated or any of those, or you haven't not dealing with your stuff and not building your brain and doing these things, and you eat, even if you're eating that organic farm-to-table, sustainable, pasture-raised, grass-fed food, if you are toxic, you're going to lose 80% of the nutrition because, for example, your pancreas, which is just part of your digestive system, will not secrete the neuropeptides required for digestion and assimilation of food. If you're going to steward your brain and your body and the earth and your mind, you need to think and eat yourself smart. You need to detox your brain every day. You need to build your brain every day. You need to understand your identity. These are basic requirements that are wrapped up in Scripture. And all I'm doing is giving you the science behind the Scriptures of renewing your mind. These are pretty much the elements of renewing your mind. In summary, what is renewing your mind? Bringing all thoughts into captivity. How often? Every 10 seconds. How do I do that? Understanding my identity, to find meaningfulness and not to be labeled and have chaotic thoughts and all that stuff. How do I discipline myself not to have all those chaotic thoughts and all those things? I'm going to practice building my brain every day. I'm going to spend at least an hour doing that. I'm going to spend one 15-minute cycle a day detoxing my brain, working on either a trauma or a toxic thought, one thought every 21 days. I'm going to understand my identity. I'm going to learn to understand what's wrong with the dysfunctional food system and not put those chemicals in my body. I'm going to be deliberate and intentional about my choices. This is what you are designed to do. This is your capability. You are brilliant. Thank you. See you tonight. And tonight, I will get into the science of choice. Thank you so much. I didn't touch on that now, but I felt this was more important. But tonight I'm going to show you great images to help you to think, feel, and choose the way that you're designed to think, feel, and choose. It's a little technique that will help you get into that every 10-second zone. And we'll also talk about a few more things as well tonight. So thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of today, and I look forward to spending the evening with you.